And I want to say good evening to everybody. It is a distinct honor to be able to introduce my friend, Mr. Brent Campbell. Mr. Campbell grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina as the master's. He majored in finance at UNC Wilmington and went on to get involved in ministry with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. He is now the InterVarsity campus minister at UNC Charlotte, where he spends most days discipling students, consulting on racial reconciliation, and representing Christ well to believers. Mr. Campbell is also currently a student at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, pursuing a Master's of Divinity degree. Not only is Brent a brother in the faith, but he is also someone that I am truly privileged to call friend the past 6 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Brent Campbell.
Thank you so much. Brent is my namesake, as you can tell, and we look just alike, so I got it from him. Thank you guys for having me. I'll go ahead and share some of my story. So even though I live in Charlotte, the story I want to tell takes place in Wilmington, North Carolina. You don't know much about me, but you should know that me and Wilmington have history. It's where I learned that to be Black is to be suspicious. It's where a teacher accused me of cheating on my paper because I used words I couldn't have known how to use. It's the place where a group of young white men threatened to kill me because, to use their words, I was a nigger on their campus in the wrong place at the wrong time. Wilmington taught me what it meant to be Black. And now, I'm not convinced that the story I'm about to tell is even one of explicit racism, but I do think that it's possible, even likely, that it's a symptom of the subtle suspiciousness of the Black body. So I hope you'll receive it. So a few years ago, around about 4 now, I was driving back to Wilmington from Charlotte to visit my family. I got there later than I expected to, and I arrived at my parents' home, but it was pretty late, around 12:30 or so, and I didn't want to wake them. And so instead, I decided to go visit a friend of mine, actually a friend I grew up with my whole life, a groomsman, actually, who lived about 2 blocks away. And so after staying in my driveway for a while, in my vehicle, I drove off to about 90 seconds away to my friend's house. When I pulled up to his home, I saw lights in the rearview mirror. And when I ended up initiating with the officer, he did the standard thing, license and registration. He informed me that he had been told that there was a person of suspicion, that there was a suspicious person in the neighborhood, and they were just trying to check it out. And so I gave him my ID, and so he said, sit tight. And so I did. About 5 minutes later, he comes back and says, hey, are you sure you live in this neighborhood? I said, yes, sir, I'm sure. And he said, oh, well, you know, there's just some suspicious people around and we're just trying to make sure everything's okay. I said, I understand, sir. You have a job to do, no worries. And so he went back. About 10 minutes later, I see another police car pull up with 2 more officers. The new officer comes to me and says, hey, sir, are you sure that you live in this neighborhood? I said, yes, sir, I am. He's like, are you sure? And at this point, I realized that the reason he was so incredulous about where I lived is because this neighborhood was a upper middle class neighborhood where for many, many, many years, I had been one of the only Black people in my neighborhood. And so I had gotten used to being suspicious. My neighbors tended to forget that I lived there. And if there was reason for scrutiny, it was often levied at me. So I was used to this by now. And so he asked if I lived there again. I said I do. And actually, I pointed out to him that the address on my ID was actually the address they had followed me from about 2 blocks away. And so he said to sit tight. And so I did. 10 minutes later, another police car comes with a new police officer. The police officers are around my vehicle, shining their lights into the back seat. I suppose they were looking for something. I'm not sure what it was. But it was at this moment that I started to get nervous. I started to get nervous because I knew what should have happened was it should have been a 5-minute stop where quickly it was verified that I was who I said I was and I was in the right place and not doing anything suspicious. But a 5-minute stop had turned into 10 minutes, and 10 minutes had turned into 20, and 20 had turned into 30, and 30 to 40 with no end in sight. And I got nervous because if they didn't believe me, and they didn't believe my ID, I wasn't sure what they might believe. I am a reasonably articulate, relatively charismatic person. It is actually my job to de-escalate and to help people engage in conflict, specifically around race. It's what I do all day long. There is no one less suspicious than me during a traffic stop, and yet I was very much suspicious. I was nervous because I know that it's a dangerous thing to be suspicious in North Carolina. Well, the story actually ended because that friend of mine, I was outside of his home. This is around 40 or 45 minutes. He comes out in a tank top and shorts. And he's a big guy, 6'2", 350 lineman. And he very aggressively comes towards us in the altercation and starts yelling, "What are you doing to my friend? What are you guys doing around here? This is discrimination. Give me your badge number. I'm going to call you lieutenant." And what do you know? Within 90 seconds, I became very, very familiar. I was not suspicious at all. 3 minutes later, they were gone. They said, "Yes, sir, we're so sorry. We were just checking things," and they bowed out gracefully. And I remember thinking as I'm watching this interaction, my friend's name is Mike. Mike is a beautiful man, and he's dope, and I love him. And I was so grateful for Mike because honestly, I felt in a position of helplessness, like I need help, like I don't know what's going to happen here. But I also was called to this truth that I was watching a 6'2", 350-pound white man charge across the lawn in a tank top and shorts at 5 police, yell at them and demand accountability from them. And I was struck that if he had dreads and he was my skin color, he may well have been shot and killed before he could even get there. And so that's a lot of my experience. And I thank you guys for hearing it.
Thank you, Brent. I appreciate your courage in being able to share that. I'm sure that as you recall that, you can't escape some of the emotions coming back, those emotions of nervousness and anxiousness. And so thank you for being willing to share that with us today. I do have a few questions for you, if I could.
Yeah.
First of all, how has your experience shaped your views on policing?
Obviously, that's not my only experience. I'd be lying if I said every experience I've had with police has been that negative, but clearly many have. I feel that experience in particular really hammered into me the truth that I am at the mercy of a police officer's subjection, right? Like it's completely subjective. If they find me to be a threat, I really resonated with a lot of what Chrissy was sharing previously, because that was exactly how my mindset around policing changed. Of like, oh, there's no law. I remember calling a police friend of mine at our local church and saying, "Hey, this is what happened," and he was like, "It was legal." I mean, like, there's nobody to call because it was completely legal, and they could have held you there for as many hours as they wanted to. And, you know, it was completely legal. It just so happened that a group of police officers, I don't know, thought I was suspicious.
Yeah, in what way, if any, has it had an impact on other areas of your life?
I don't know anybody who is excited to be pulled over or to engage with police officers, but I will say that for me, it is a uniquely, it's difficult, partly because I recognize at all times, I'm trying to become the least threatening, least suspicious person I can be. And a lot of times I go pretty far before I realize that I cannot change my skin color. Right, that what made a 5-minute stop into a nearly 50-minute stop was not anything that I was doing or even not doing. That it actually had to do with the way I look, and so that's distressing. it worries me more for my family than for me, but for sure.
Powerful. Another question for you, if I could. What do you believe is the role of the white ally in helping change policing and the criminal court system? You told us about an ally that you had that night. What do you believe is the role of the white ally, generally speaking, in helping to change policing criminal court system?
Yeah, my friend Mike, he's proverbial, right? I mean, he's a walking metaphor, very large metaphor. Because the reality is, Mike was the only person who could help me in that situation. He had a unique advantage. He had a unique privilege, if you want to call it. His words resonated in a certain way, in ways that mine wouldn't, or probably even someone that looked like me. And so, for sure, Mike is my friend, and he had more to do than just to stand up for me. But I think like he's a great metaphor for the white ally, that there are people who have access to people and places and structures that the majority of Black and brown people will never get to, or if they are a token or marginals. And so that's the way of the world. That's often how things work, even outside of race. And it makes a lot of sense to me that it would be the same inside of race. So I think there are people who have position and influence, and it's an obligation to use that to the best of their ability for the sake of others.
Amen. One last question, if I could. If you could change just one thing about policing in America, what would that be?
It would probably be qualified immunity. I think that it's very hard to be held accountable when you have an inbuilt escape button, and either that or tying compensation and like recompense to some sort of police pension. Like, I know a lot of times when something happens and then the case is settled, it's not like the police officer, the department doesn't necessarily feel it, right? It's like there's a budget set aside for that. I probably paid into it, so did you, right? And so nothing happens. But yeah, probably one of those two things.
Excellent. Brent, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but thank you for the courage of being able to share that, and the help that is, hopefully, to help make things better in the future. Thank you.